Hello, this is your host, Phil. So, I started reading a book called The Bolshevik Invasion of the West by Louis Francis Budenz. And this book is actually, it cost quite a bit for me to acquire. And I don't know, and this was a little while ago, it was over $100, and I believe it was the last copy I could find at the time, which is why I snatched it. Didn't want it getting into the wrong hands. Anyway, it seems like a good book to read because it applies more now than ever. I mean, can we not see communism in America now as an actual possibility, as opposed to when this book was written? Around 40 years ago or more. 1960s. 1965 is when he started out writing it. Anyway, let's do this book because it's old enough to be... I highly doubt this is... that there's some copyright against reading this. I can't even find a place to get this book, let alone audio. But unless you're willing to dish out hundreds of dollars for a book, you can't get it. You can't get an e-copy or anything. So let's read this. Let's get this out there, because this needs to be heard. So I'm going to start with the intro today. And yes, if you hear a bird chirping in the background, that is my bird Peeps. Peeps the parakeet. It's a good bird. Okay, so the book is dedicated to Joseph the Workman. The pseudo-preface is The West at Bay, How It Got That Way. And let's start. Out of these pages there comes a blazing challenge to the American people. Shall their republic, at the end of the next 3 decades, be vigorously alive or on the road to death? Shall the United States, let us say, by the year 2000, be transformed to a Soviet America, or shall it be a thriving democratic republic? Okay, remember this was written... it was published in 1966. And I do believe others thought that this would happen earlier. There's that guy on YouTube that everyone refers to, whose name I'm forgetting right now. I'll remember it later. He's always referred to about how the changes were already here and how we're becoming communist really fast. I'll figure out his name later. Okay, back to the book. So, yeah, I guess it took a little longer. It was done a little more subtly or something. Anyway, so far the decision of dominant forces, somewhat blindly given, has been in favor of national suicide. The record of the past 30 years, as set forth in this account of Soviet-American relations since 1933, cannot be depicted as a happy or encouraging one, since recognition of the Bolshevik Revolution by the United States. The history of the period is dotted with American setbacks, the loss of all Eastern Europe and mainland China, with only a few hopeful incidents. As 1965 draws to a close, the American nation, despite the initiative of its president, finds itself afflicted with a strange case of political schizophrenia. Even worse today, huh? American astronauts, backed by magnificent scientific devices, have made this nation the leading land in the conquest of space, and yet the powerful military machine of the United States, employing the earth-shaking B-52s all the way from Guam, has been impotent at making any decisive gain against the Viet Cong in Vietnam. Okay, on a side note, that was intentional. That you can read about just how that was a war of containment and a kind of experimental war, actually, by the UN along UN. It was the first quote unquote UN war. Now, The Shadows of Power by James Perloff, Council of Foreign Relations, I think it's CFR, Council of Foreign Relations in the Shadows of Power by James Perloff. he explains how the Vietnam War was not meant to be won, and how the generals and everyone got pretty pissed off by it. And Senator McCarthy, he should be a saint, and we need him back. Unfortunately, they knew what was going on, and that war was not meant to be won. Anyway, let's continue, otherwise I'll never get through this. The present president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, has displayed more determination to check the communist tide than any of his immediate predecessors, and yet his hand is mysteriously withheld by powerful forces within his own country for winning the Vietnam War by such all-out measures as the bombing of Hanoi and Haiphong. A small group of loud, shouting pacifists and friends of the communist conspiracy join hands with the Morgan Rockefeller interests on Wall Street and much of the American business community in achieving this effect. At the very moment that Comrade Leonid Brezhnev, leader of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, admitted, or rather boasted, that his regime was furnishing materiel of war to the Viet Cong, a special commission of businessmen officially appointed by Washington was in Romania and Poland to sell goods to the Red dictators. These American goods, if furnished to the satellites with the willingness that the United States granted wheat to Soviet Russia, will serve to fill the gap in Moscow's production created by aid to Ho Chi Minh. All such contradictions, causing repeated hesitation and giving downright aid to Soviet communism in its dedication to dominating the world, has created that indecision which has marked the course of the West. It is, to put the matter bluntly, the triumph of the communist line over the Western and particularly the American mind. Let's hear that again, that's a good one. It is, to put the matter bluntly, the triumph of the communist line over the Western and particularly the American mind. Now, isn't that true? Just look at how dumbed down we've become these days. Anyway, out of this clouded condition, which has been directly stimulated by Moscow and Peking, has come stunning success for the Bolshevik invasion of the West. This outstanding phenomena of our time, which has brought communism within striking distance of American shores, and which now, through the august World Marxist Review, sets forth grandiose red plans for a conquered Latin America, can, after all, be readily understood and combated. Such can be done if Americans will put their minds to the task, which as of yet they have avoided, to comprehend why the United States is now on the defensive in world history. The story of the actual communist intrusion into American thinking should prove of considerable help. It should be grasped right in the beginning that Soviet communism is intent upon absorbing control of the entire world for a flaming purpose apparently beyond the comprehension of the normal authority on communism. That purpose is technically not supposedly for the enhancement of dictatorship alone. It is rather to assure that what comes after the dictatorship shall be achieved on a world scale, the perfect or communist society. In carrying forward the conflict against non-believers in atheistic communism, the Moscow-Peking regimes resort to 5 methods of warfare. Of these, the military, economic, and that which uses reforms as a screen for communist advance can be most easily defeated. It is the philosophical or religious and the political or psychological forms of decimation which stand out most powerfully in the arsenal of Leonid Brezhnev and Mao Zedong. It is concerning these devastating tactics upon which America, and with it the West, is dismally lacking in education. During the whole sweep of Soviet-American relations recorded in this work, the American Republic has been treated as if though it were a conglomeration of country bumpkins never able to detect the directives that the Soviet capitals have given in their political advance that is now threatening Asia, Africa, and Latin America. There is a presumption amounting almost to a superstition, even among some who call themselves conservatives, that the independent thinking American can never be the victim of repetition, such as the communists use. But every evening, every American at his dinner hour is subjected to the appetizing insistence, repeated day after day, that he take note of the drip, drip, drip of his stomach acid, that he note the foul breath of those in the subway, that he look sharply to his body odors, and that he enjoy the vision of his slimy dentures as they bite into an apple. Apparently, this repetition has effect on him in a favorable way, since it induces him to purchase enough of the commodities advertised by Madison Avenue, to keep that advertising capital and television in luxurious comfort. All through the day, this American also witnesses housewives leaping through windows, other housewives escorted through the air, washing machines mysteriously elevated, and birdlings of the family Columbidae flying into the kitchen window. Can it be wondered that a population which has been made the butt of such commercialized repetition by the information agencies of its own country should be overcome by the simple expression, peaceful coexistence? Okay, peaceful coexistence. I guess back then that was a no-no, and something that we thought was communist, or at least some people knew was communist, but now that's on bumper stickers and everything. Anyway, when to this indignity to their thinking has been added such questionable forms of entertainment on television as have caused two chairmen of the Federal Communications Commission to label the entertainment as a wasteland, it cannot be surprising that such losses to the free world have occurred by American consent. Okay, and television has become even more of a wasteland. Complete wasteland, not just a teenage wasteland. A complete, utter wasteland for everyone. Convincing old people they need to go get jabbed and all kinds of stuff, and stay home, blah blah blah. Fear-mongering by repeating the same lies over and over again. Right? Such crude commercialism may, it is true, build up those huge financial resources by which magnificent current historical happenings are brought by wireless transmissions into the homes of the masses. But these Arabian Nights scenes out of real life do not compensate for the almost total lack of explanation concerning the communist line which is coincidentally molding American thinking, and even creeping into television itself. Rather than have the people of America concern themselves intelligently with the true nature of communism out of its own Marxist-Leninist classics, and from its manifold conveyors of the line, television and the cinema, beguile them with chiller, thriller, super spy horrors which are reminiscent of the macabre dance of death orgies of early capitalism. Americans must recognize once and for all, from the account appearing in the study, that the sharp setbacks which they experienced in East Europe, mainland China, and Cuba, at their very door, were caused by American leadership itself. And with that responsibility must be linked up a considerable section of the American press and the complacent acquiescence of a great number of the American people. Especially the press, though. Just saying. He'll get to that, though. Anyway. All of them, each in turn, failed to intercept or to interpret the directive documents of the communist conspiracy, which a little energy would have shown were right before their noses. It may be argued that the whole American nation, including its leadership, was ill prepared for the task of realizing that it was through the great political war that Stalin and his successors have been encroaching on this continent's security. Much of its education has been defective. So far as the authorities go, this may be said to have some truth in it. There is much evidence that the scientific mechanical concentration by the United States in its purely technical civilization has led to dire results when confronted by Soviet shrewd thinking and political planning. Both Dr. James B. Conant in his The Education of American Teachers and Dr. James D. Koerner in his study The Miseducation of American Teachers have agreed that there are serious shortcomings in American schoolrooms, even more so today. These arise out of the John Dewey system, socialist, and from U.S. preoccupation with science and technology, and might I say, specialization in such, and not having anything like a classical education at all, in the mistraining of American teachers, so that they learn more about the techniques of teaching than about the contents of their subjects. Indeed, what do teachers know about all the horrors in the past, other than Nazism, of course, because that's all we hear about. And we don't even hear about how it's being repeated. Anyway, I can go on with that. Back to the book. Then again, President Johnson has confessed that science was in the upper rooms and humanities in the basement, when in the fall he signed the extensive bill to promote wider education. Fortunately today, that has just become even wider, including race, class, and gender, mandatory studies, complete nonsense stuff. Anyway, complete communist stuff. Back to the book. But America's bizarre view of what are the humanities was displayed when the major portion of the funds for such humanities was not devoted to that purpose at all. If there be something like monotonous repetition in some of the pages of this study, the reader must understand that this becomes essential because of the constant practice of repetition by the communists themselves. And Fauci? Anyway, from Lenin, as we shall see, on through the regime of Stalin and Khrushchev, to the present-day Leonid Brezhnev, there appears in all directives to the comrades the drone, as it would seem, a peaceful coexistence, under cover of which there is constantly advanced the endless wars of national liberation. Just as Brezhnev himself thunders the oft-repeated word comrades in his recent instructions to his followers, an examination of the information bulletin of the World Marxist Review will disclose, so does this victorious slogan of peaceful coexistence in the Soviet sense continue to ring out. This it does over and over again as the Western world is repeatedly misled. There may be those who will complain that too many references have been devoted here to the Catholic Church, even though I have not been able to do justice to the subject today. It may be remarked by way of explanation that the Catholics are the chief target of red directives in the present period. It's interesting because that's actually... So when I found out about the New World Order and all these quote-unquote conspiracies going on, right? I actually became convinced that there was evil. And there is such a thing as just sheer evil. Like, satanic evil. And I became Catholic. Whether I am now... I am, in a way... But intellectually, I have issues with faith. It's difficult for me, but I want to be. It's just difficult. Anyway, that's me and how I became Catholic. And I also believe James Perloff, because I know he wrote the book Council of Foreign Relations in the Shadows of Power. And then he recently did Truth is a Lonely Warrior. And in that one, he said he became a Christian for the same reason, which is interesting because, research these conspiracies and what they do to children and all this Satanism involved in it. It's just sick. It just makes you wonder what the heck is wrong with the world. I mean, it's just the world is so much more nasty than we give it credit for, which it's awful. Anyway, this is me kind of in my mind. I don't know if you read the Brothers Karamazov. Probably not, because our education system sucks. But if you have, my mind is kind of like Ivan and Alyosha, like bipolar, like in a kind of bipolar relationship. It's like sometimes I'm totally Alyosha and just wanna be religious and you know, reach peace of mind, enlightenment, or whatever, and you know, oneness with union with God. And there's another part of me that's just like, it is just so unfair though, and it's so unfair in a way that I don't know what's going on. It just doesn't make sense. And then Ivan, in the way that Ivan goes off on Alyosha, in that I can't believe in your God, basically, because of what he does to children. And even so, more nowadays. I mean, like Ghislaine Maxwell, like, why is no one being persecuted there? And Epstein hangs himself? You kidding me? Okay, yeah. Ignorance, just complete it's just ridiculous. Anyway, let me get back to the book, because that is what I'm presenting. I'm sorry for my tangents. I hope they're amusing. Please let me know, because I'm going to get rid of them if not. Particularly with this book. I mean, this book is meant to be read, not necessarily for me to just comment on and off with, but let me know. It would help. Thank you. So let me return. It may be remarked, by way of explanation, that the Catholics are the chief target of red directives in the present period. The means of advancing the cause of scientific atheism through the simple device of extensive dialogues with Catholics has been discussed and debated in all its aspects for the benefit of the world's comrades. All such considerations are based on the premise set forth in the World Marxist Review of March 1960 that, in quotes, the Roman Catholic Church is a powerful part of the superstructure of the capitalist system. Ideologically, it expresses the interests of the monopolies and political reaction. End quote. This theme underlies all current red expressions of policy down to the June 1965 edition of that publication, which singles out the erosion of the Church and its loss of believers as a favorable sign of the ability today to win Catholics to communism. Okay. And if only he could have witnessed Obama in being crowned or whatever in what was it, Notre Dame? Something like some place that calls itself, university that calls itself Catholic, that's a satanic haven instead. Anyway, you know, let Obama in and fired E. Michael Jones and a bunch of other stuff. E. Michael Jones is a Catholic commentator who's pretty good. Fired him for not believing in abortion, and that was a while ago. So yeah. Anyway, okay. So historically, the Vatican Council, and I believe he's talking about it in general here, but he's going to talk about the Second Vatican Council, which becomes obvious. Historically, the Vatican Council is not only a master move to bring the Church more fully into the modern world, all the uncertainty connected with it having also characterized the years which led to the Council of Trent. The Vatican Council is, in addition, an ideological rallying point for all believers in the gigantic effort to halt the progress of atheism now sweeping the world. Then, and finally, Pope Paul VI grasped the banner of peace from the hands of Lenin, Stalin, Malenkov, Khrushchev, Mao, Brezhnev, at least for this critical moment. On that epical October 4th, 1965, definitely the Second Vatican Council, His Holiness told the General Assembly of the United Nations, in quotes, "If you wish to be brothers, let the arms fall from your hands." End quotes. Why is he even talking to the United Nations? Why did he talk to the United Nations? Church had nothing to do with them other than say, get behind me. That's that. Anyway. And in addition, with great warmth and emphasis, no more war. War never again. Soviet communism as long as it remains communism. Oh yeah, one more thing. And he also apologized for the Crusades. Okay? Right? Like, we'd probably be living under Islam if it weren't for the friggin' Crusades. So that's ridiculous. I mean, seriously. Ridiculous. You can hate the Crusades as much as you want. Hate on all that stuff. But if they didn't happen, I mean, Italy, like Spain, there wouldn't have been a Europe for us to be talking about right now. There wouldn't be probably wouldn't be communism. Maybe I would prefer any theocracy over communism. To be honest, I would become Muslim rather than become communist. Yeah. Anyway, sorry again. I just can't help myself. Okay. Historically, well, where were we? And in addition, with great warmth and emphasis, no more war, war never again. Soviet communism, as long as it remains communism, can never, in reality, accept such slogans, for evidence mounts on evidence within this work that it is intent upon endless wars of national liberation. Kind of sounds like the Democratic Party since Clinton. Just endless war and stuff. That's another. Okay. Keep this to myself. The ideological contest, which is thus released over the term peace, may have some of the earmarks of that gross attempt to distort the encyclical of Pope John XIII, Pacem in terris, peace on earth. There will be some who will advise one and all that the Catholic Church has now surrendered to atheistic communism, just as they will say, as indeed they have said, that the Church capitulated to liberalism when Pope Leo XIII entered into accommodation with the Republic of France. A Republic of France which was committing genocide on Catholics, actually. More on that later. But yeah, on this, I've got to say, even worse today. I mean, we pretty much have a communist pope. He's not my pope. Okay, as a Catholic, I know I shouldn't say that, but no, never. That guy, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, is not my pope. Okay? He's not pope. I don't know if that makes me a sedevacantist or just outside the church. I don't know. I am what I am. I don't think can even be defined by definitions like Catholicism, as much as I am a Catholic at heart, and soul, and culture. So, yeah, it's just gotten so much worse, and how it has capitulated to liberalism. Yes. And, yeah, we have the Pope writing on economics now, some crazy stuff, but, and buying into sustainability, which is really just a way to destroy small business to make state business a thing. Yeah. Okay. Back to the book. It was such an argument which I insisted upon for myself while a member of the Communist Party, a thought which kept me within the party for more than a year after I had thought I should leave. This vision of a sort of quote-unquote communist Catholicism, whatever may come of it in the future, is based in part on a confusion of Soviet peaceful coexistence with peace. All major reference to the Vatican Council was omitted from this work in order to make it a less bulky volume than had originally been planned. It's almost unfortunate, because I would have enjoyed that. But my maturing age, I must confess to 75 years for my next birthday, my erratic health, and my restricted finances precluded the production of any analysis of Western life beyond that of Soviet-American relations. for the last fatal 30 years. It was from such considerations, likewise, which compelled me, regretfully, from reviewing American internal affairs during this same era. Accordingly, I have promised myself that this work shall be the beginning of a series of studies, the next of which shall probably be Fate of the Anglo-American Empire. Ooh, now that sounds interesting. And another, Prospects for a Soviet America. It's too bad this guy didn't live to, like, you know, the oldest age. This guy's cool. He's written other books too, because he was a communist who came out, and well, you'll see. As to my credentials for this task, they are well established. It was my responsibility for years to interpret and develop the quote-unquote line as it came from Moscow, when I was managing editor of the Daily Worker and a member of the National Committee of the Communist Party of the United States. Upon leaving that party, I sought, by establishing classes in communism in 35 different cities, to let Americans know what was afoot historically for them. Gotta say, what a hard worker. I mean, this guy's written many books, and what a hard worker. Too bad he was working for them for so many years, but for a time this bore real fruits, as the number of organizations endorsing the breaking off of relations with Soviet Russia increased as their members in various state branches became aware of what communism is and how it operates. But arteriosclerotic heart disease intervened. For years, in my column in certain Catholic newspapers and elsewhere, I have endeavored to cure the blindness imposed upon the American nation, its utter inability, either among its leaders or its masses, to analyze the final purposes and the immediate plans of the communist movement. Such a duty becomes even more imperative since the struggle of the future will probably not be so much through the engines of war as through the continued penetration of the thought processes of the world's population. Now, isn't that true today? The war on America isn't necessarily an outside war. I would say the wars we're waging are a war on America because all they do is benefit. I don't want to sound like a communist hero, but all they do is benefit the military-industrial complex, which, even if it was state-owned, like in Russia, you know, still needs money and wants workers, so it could go either way. I mean, you know what I mean? We've seen it in the Soviet way. But yeah, no, the thought processes. I mean, we have Antifa, all this stuff today. BLM, just it's all Marxist. They've infected our country. Not through physical war, but through the continued penetration of the thought processes of the world's population. As the Chilean president just, you know, who was elected, also commie. Okay, back to the book. In taking up this subject, I do so in all charity, without any animus, even against the communists or their leaders. It is true that these communists themselves display an uneasiness concerning their own inevitable world outlook and the tactics they employ against those who come to disagree with them. It has been their invariable custom, rather than meet arguments against them squarely, to heap abuse of a vile character against those who have left their ranks, like the Democrats. Such a custom was initiated by Karl Marx himself. He spread rumors that Moses Hess, the communist rabbi as he was called, and the man who had acquainted Marx and Engels with communism, was rotten with venereal disease. The accusation even extended to Hess's wife. The reason that Hess disagreed ideologically with Marx on what communism was. Likewise, he caused Hermann Krieg, who had migrated to America and established a small German paper there, to be expelled from the communist organization. In doing so, he charged Krieg with accepting bourgeoisie money for his publications. It mattered little that Marx did the very same thing. But Krieg's actual offense was that he had advocated a help to small farmers that disagreed with Marx's views. Now, small farmers are really having a hard time now, by the way. and it seems like some kind of... anyway, I gotta keep my views out here a little bit, but farming is a whole other topic. Farmers are being decimated. Anyway, and not just in America. And that's Bill Gates and people like him. Anyway. Once more, Michael Bakunin, the great anarchist leader, was blackened all over Europe among radical circles by Marx and Engels as a Tsarist spy, even though he was being sought after for arrest by the Tsarist police. Out of these incidents has developed a special method for waging the struggle for power, which, as Dr. Leopold Schwarzschild says in his Karl Marx, the Red Prussian, was to develop a special school, the communist school of character and physical assassination, down to the present time. To the present time, indeed. And the goodwill toward all men with which this is written, and with the objectivity which should mark every recorder of historical events, I must express regret for being compelled to belabor the New York Times. Oh no, don't regret that at all. New York Times is totally exposed now. Happens to be my favorite newspaper, which I have subscribed to in whatever part of America I happen to be. Its radio station, WQXR, has been a great solace to me during my long illness. But the record of the Times and its satellite press speaks for itself. There was the misinformation given by Walter Duranty concerning Stalin and his regime at the moment of greatest terror. There was the continual overlooking of the ambitions of Red China, and even before that, there was the encouragement of those who wrote falsely of the Chinese communists as agrarian reformers. In addition, there was the comfort given to the communists in the Civil War of Spain, and the total misinformation fed the American people concerning the purposes and plans of the communist Fidel Castro. Oh, more on that, actually. Fidel Castro was... The New York Times literally helped Fidel Castro come to power. That's all I'm going to say on that. I can provide more proof later when my bird isn't squawking so much. Anyway, of late there has been added the almost hysterical opposition to American defense in South Vietnam, and the ambivalent proposals which have been totally blind to the communist directive documents. In drawing on all its resources of strength and courage in the future, the American nation will have to bear in mind, from the record of the last 3 decades, that Soviet communism looks forward into continuous warfare until the Rockefeller-Morgan rule in America and throughout the West is crushed. Now, okay, again, a comment. I do wonder, though, like, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Morgans, all these rich, Bill Gates, whatever, he's not even that rich compared to some of these people. Like, what is their relationship to communism? It's almost like this axis of bankers and the whole quote-unquote Anglo-American establishment somehow became kind of communist and yet fascist at the same time. I don't know. I've got to figure that out myself, and if you have any suggestions, let me know. But these days, it seems like it's a combination of fascism, feudalism, and communism that they want to impose on us, and it's like impossible to rule out, to point at one and be like, this is the problem, because all three are there. I mean, stakeholder capitalism? Anyway. Okay. And throughout the West is crushed. Nor can the common man, while rejecting communism because of its establishment of an overshadowing monopoly and dictatorship, be indifferent to the urgency for the curbing of those monopoly capitalists. Though it be difficult to attain, he can only look forward to the preservation and extension, or rather the restoration, of property among the many. We are made conscious of the Bolshevik use of monopoly capitalism's abuses in the Red invasion of the West, when as late as the May 1965 number 5 issue of International Affairs, Moscow's Scientific organ of quote-unquote scientific, just like our quote-unquote science today, scientific organ of sedition runs an article by Victor Perlow, outstanding American Red economist. Its title, U.S. Monopolies in Latin America. In it we read, in part, during the 2 decades since the Second World War, the U.S. corporations have multiplied their plunder of Latin America's resources, intensified their exploitation of its people's labor, and more thoroughly subordinated the continent's entire economic, political, and cultural life. End quotes. Yeah, well, I'd ask about China and Tibet and whatever parts of Africa and wherever it just rapes. I mean, Tibet was just awful what they did there. Yeah. He goes on to show that extraction from Latin America by foreign countries has increased as follows: petroleum 2.5 times, iron ore 9 times, copper 75%. Up to 1962, extraction of bauxite increased 3.5 times. He places the responsibility for the consequent reactionary political conditions in Latin America at the doors of the Rockefellers, the Graces, and the Cabots. This is a convenient way of pointing the finger of accusation at the most immediate of Latin American exploiters among the 80 families ruling Wall Street. In preparing this historical review of why the United States is in its present difficult position and confused condition, I owe a debt of gratitude to Colonel Charles C. Greene, United States Air Force, retired, for his regular visits to the communist bookstores and his provision for me of current communist directive documents, since these are denied American eyes by America's own educative agencies. This is more than a simple service. I've also had the benefit of my own library of thousands of books, embracing general history, philosophy, literature, and the communist publications from Moscow, Peking, and the capitals of the satellite countries covering the past 30 years. To the Redwood Library of Newport, I am indebted for its generosity in assisting me with such auxiliary books as I needed. My thanks also go out to the Historical Research Foundation, Incorporated, for its help in completing this work. This undertaking does not necessarily in any way represent their views. Although this review of Soviet-American relations during the past 3 decades is a vindication of my own stand after leaving the Communist Party, I write these pages in an entirely different spirit from that of an exultation. On this day, marking the 20th anniversary of my having left the party and returned to the Catholic Church, I would inscribe myself rather in the words I hope will be placed above my grave. He was a sinner doing penance. History, meanwhile, demands the United States, as leader of the West, quietly but inexorably, let your opinion makers and political leaders of all parties grasp the nature of Soviet communism by mastering the Marxist-Leninist classics, from V.I. Lenin to Brezhnev. Let them likewise study the conveyors of the line, the World Marxist Review, International Affairs, and the New Times from Moscow, the Peking Review, Political Affairs, and the Worker, and thus come to know in advance what Moscow and Peking intend to do for further American ruination. It's a good point. We should study our enemy, shouldn't we? Whatever happened to that? Seems like all we want to do is just hate our enemy and not know them nowadays. At the present moment, just as this is being written, the Kremlin is depicted as a potential St. George, ready and willing to aid America to slay the Red Dragon of Red China. It is then that Soviet Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko arises in the United Nations to provide bait for Wall Street by offering American business good relations, but at the same time making all of this conditional on ending aggression in Vietnam and elsewhere. In other words, by suggesting that the United States deliberately lose the Vietnam War, which we did. Part being me. While the New York Times recommends that the Sino-Soviet conflict makes of Soviet Russia a possible strong partner of the USA in establishing peace, the Worker of September 28th hails Gromyko's charge of U.S. aggression and demands complete surrender before the communist powers. Apparently, this plea, dispatched by the telegraph agency of the communist conspiracy, had some effect. By early October, sentiment had grown so strongly in America to conciliate the Soviet powers that the Secretaries of State, Defense, and Commerce backed vigorously 6 major American cigarette companies for purchasing Oriental tobacco from Red Yugoslavia. Okay, peeps, yep, we understand you're excited. It's my bird, and he is excited. And thus it is that while one department of the American government, the Surgeon General, condemns cigarette smoking as poisonous and tries to persuade Congress to label it as such, when it comes to red trade, Washington is more complacent. In effect, the American people are told that it is against their national interest to halt the development of cancer by cigarette smoking, if that transaction will build up the red economies. It is at the same period of time that Moscow intensifies its effort to break the United States off from West Germany, undoubtedly the only genuine ally that America possesses. I kind of like that opinion, because I think our quote-unquote genuine ally, the Middle East, is not an ally at all. He seems to get that. Nice. This it does by a series of leading directives in international affairs, the magazine run by experts in sedition and in the export of revolution. In this magazine, September number 9, number of strong assaults on West Germany's alleged revanchism, and on the bonds between Bonn and Washington are coupled with a general worldwide review of the aggressive policies of U.S. imperialism. These charges, which go far and wide throughout the world and have lost America many valuable allies, do not hesitate to assert that a West German mafia has been set up in Washington, although the name is constantly misspelled mafia with 2 F's. We learn to our surprise that this Hitlerite lobby was originally a creature of Saint Joseph R. McCarthy, Senator Joseph R. McCarthy, the poor man who seems in all communist propaganda to be guilty of every possible evil injuring progress of communism. Good for him. There is another thought that must be garnered from these pages. The work on this book began in January 1965. Let it be known very early that there was continuing against America the encirclement by Moscow and Peking set down by Stalin in 1939. That is the sole explanation for what has been happening in the world for the past series of years, during which the Bolshevik invasion of the West has progressed. Now it may be pointed out with confidence that this encirclement is actually the communist world objective, since it has been announced boldly and bravely by Defense Minister Lin Biao of Red China. A century from now, let us say in 2080, if we make it that far, 100 years after the Soviet Communist Party promises to introduce the beginnings of communism into its land, an itinerant reader browsing through a second-hand bookstore may come across these pages. It'll be expensive, I might say. I don't think he realized how scarce his books were going to become. I invite him to examine them carefully, as they will confirm that a Soviet world was victoriously established by influencing the Western mind in the Great Political War, or that the American nation awoke sufficiently and in time to detect how it was being maneuvered to its own defeat. Louis Francis Budenz, Newport, Rhode Island, October 11th, 1965, on the feast day, the Maternity of Mary. Okay, that is the end of what is essentially the first chapter / preface, as there is an actual chapter 1. And another book that I'm probably going to have to read just because it's been on my bookshelf for quite a while, in tandem with this, is Old Lies for New. I believe that's by Galitzin. I'll link that later. And I'd like to hear any comments, questions, advice, etc. Let me know what you think. Should I not be commenting? Do you like the comments? Is anyone even watching this? I don't know. But at some point, let me know. Thank you. All right, have a good day.